And thank you to everyone for being here. This is just an opportunity to be able to hear some great research that's going on in its infancy from some graduate people and those who perhaps have also changed their research direction, which is a great opportunity in itself. And so I'm going to spend just a short time introducing the dissertation proposal program itself, then also the recipients, and hand it over to Paul so that he can walk each one through their presentation. And so, Paul, if you would go ahead and advance the screen. Okay, for those of you who may be new to the dissertation awards, the purpose of the program is basically to honor and support doctoral candidates. And this is something that Judy started with others. And so she should be the one talking about it, because she has been not only so instrumental in making it real and making it relevant to the original intent of MSR. And so we appreciate that. Okay, and there are others, and I'm going to share that as well. But the intent is to bring in research that is of the value that would be associated with the Academy. Okay, because we respect the Academy in terms of the research contributions, and MSR is part of that. And so basically we want to bring in and share research that is honors the domain that has been defined for MSR and updated over the years. Okay, next slide, please. Just wanted to share the names of those who this year were judges, because basically I'm typically never a judge, but we did not have access to one of our judges. And so basically we have two people who have been judges for a very long time. Lee, and I hope Lee is here, because we want to thank him, because not only is he one of the original founders of MSR, but he also has been so supportive in ways that many people would not even know. But he has consistently been a judge for many years, and so we appreciate his expertise. Conti Siani, I don't see Conti here, but again, he has been a judge for so many years, very supportive in many ways. And over time, we've had many other judges. In 2021, we see that Richard and Judy and Julia were judges. And so there is a history in terms of the support behind this award, and we want to just share that appreciation. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to read this, but basically this is the criteria. And so we look at that sense of appeal. Is it appealing to an MSR audience? Is it significant to the domain with which MSR stands? Does it have a management application? Is it a theoretical contribution? Because we do believe that there are theoretical applications and aspirations to the type of research that we do. And so this is kind of the criteria, recognizing that many people have been involved in developing this program, developing the criteria, developing this whole effort and supporting it over years. And so we just want to express our thanks to all those who have continued this, which Judy has started years ago. Next slide, please. In terms of our finalists, and I'll just introduce them, each one, and thank each one of them, because their work has been stellar, absolutely. And so this is an alphabetical order in terms of the order of the award that will be announced at the business meeting. Vikram Gulati, his dissertation was, can paradoxical mindset and ambidextrous behavior be developed? Okay, a mixed method examination of the role of oneness and development of consciousness. Vikram, we appreciate your research, finely done, and appreciate your submission. Next, please. Janelle King, The intersectionality of creativity and spirituality, credo spiritual or CS dynamics with the agency of organizational change. It was just excellent, excellent, Janelle. And you've been here throughout the research colloquium. And so we appreciate your continued support and work and involvement in this effort as well. Next slide. Anita I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Minderati. Okay. And I've had interactions with Anita over time as well. Relationship between corporate social irresponsibility and corporate social responsibility and firm performance. Excellent. Excellent work and that insight in terms of we do have to look at both sides to research. We appreciate that as well. And next one, please. Ndiaga, say the management of religious expression in Senegalese military and paramilitary organization, just outstanding. Outstanding in terms of topic and also how the research was conducted and the value that it adds to our overall perspective of religious expression. So we appreciate that. Good. Again, our thanks go out to all of the finalists. I am going to turn it over to Paul because unfortunately I'm having to leave for another meeting in just a few minutes. But again, we just wanted to show our appreciation and our thanks for all of the hard work that you have done.
Thank you so much, Juanita. And once again, truly inspiring to be present to the quality of work that is being done at all levels of scholarship in this esteemed community. So want to give as much time as possible for each of our presenters to each of our finalists to present a brief abstract of their work. So doing the math here, we've got about 40 minutes and 4 of you. So let's call it 10 minutes each and see how that goes. Another challenge in speed presentation for sure, but we'll go in order that alphabetical as Ornita presented in the slides. And so up first would be Vikram. And I will just turn it over to you to introduce yourself and your work in about 10 minutes. Thank you, Vikram.
Sure, thank you so much. Really an honor to be here and participate and present in the research colloquium. And this whole process has been a learning process for me. I did submit last year. And when I went back and read what I submitted last year, I was ashamed at what I had submitted. So hopefully it improved this year in terms of what's out there. So let me just quickly present the slides. In some way, this research is very autobiographical for me because I've spent 30 years in the industry and then switched to academics. And in some way, this research talks about my own personal journey in terms of how I have done business and how I've conducted myself, more so when I was CEO of companies, in terms of what worked for me and what did not. So let me share my screen. I hope the screen is visible. So the question that I'm asking is, can paradoxical mindset and ambidextrous behavior, and we'll define both these terms, be developed, and why these terms are important in today's context? It's a mixed method examination. I'll use both quantitative and qualitative on the role of oneness, and oneness is being seen as a proxy for the development of consciousness. Dr. Anil Maheshwari is my guide for this dissertation. So what's the context that we are dealing with? Something that we are all living as academics, as business people, as practitioners. The business environment is clearly getting more and more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think COVID just amplified what was any case happening. But along with that, what's happening now is that automation, AI-based decision support systems, and delayering of organizational structures are moving more and more complex works to lower levels of management. This is important. Along with this, what's happening is that the gig economy, along with remote working, and again, COVID helped make remote working real and perhaps permanent, is weakening the organizational support structures that would normally provide learning and handholding to help individuals deal with these changes in nature of work. Right? So these two things are happening simultaneously. Organizations need to be both process driven, they need to be very disciplined, and they need to be innovative and creative at the same time. And for organization to succeed to do that, they need managers, they need leaders to be both innovative and creative on one end, and both disciplined and process driven on the other end. They need to be able to do both these things with equal ease. And in addition to all this, we need to make sure that we are not getting into burnout situations. The need for personal sense of growth and meaningful work also needs to be addressed. Right? So this is the context in which we are really working through this particular dissertation, this project. So what is individual ambidexterity? Individual ambidexterity goes back to Jim March's definition of exploration and exploitation. It's the capability of an individual to be both innovative and creative, and disciplined and process driven with equal ease. So this is a concept that's been there in organizational science for quite a bit of time. Dr. March clearly coined the ideas of exploration and exploitation. It was further improved upon by Birkinshaw and Gibson, and Mom et al. And others have done a lot of work around that. It's always been seen inside an organizational context. And what we have seen later on is that individual ambidexterity depends on the individual's ability to deal with paradoxical demands that are sort of opposing in nature. And situational factors such as resource scarcity, which is now the rule, along with contradictory demands, intensify the individual's recognition and experience of tensions. This tension that builds up within the mind when you have contradictory demands and goals with resource scarcity. And the ability of an individual to manage this kind of a tension is called paradoxical mindset. Right? So whether an individual strives or struggles amid these tensions depends upon the extent to which they have a paradoxical mindset or a paradox mindset. And because it's to do with tensions, it directly impacts workplace well-being as well. So this is sort of a quick summary of the literature review that supports this. So if you look at paradoxical mindset and individual ambidextrous behavior, they're very closely connected. There are lots of antecedents, what drives it from an organizational perspective. There are lots of consequences that have been well researched in terms of why people are more successful when they exhibit this kind of a behavior and this kind of a mindset. But what makes an individual have more of a paradoxical mindset and have exhibit more ambidextrous behavior remains underexplored. So this is the problem definition, if you say on the right-hand side, in terms of the practitioners' problem that you see in today's market, in today's workplace. Now, that essentially gets summarized in this, which is that paradox mindset is the capability to embrace paradoxical tension, which leads to individual ambidexterity, which allows an individual to both explore, which is find new alternatives, create, innovate, and exploit, which is more about being process driven, exploit current capabilities and current strengths. And it also leads to workplace well-being. So this is something that is on the right-hand side of the equation, if you may. Now, how do you deal with paradoxes? So there are multiple theories around this. Spatial separation, keep them in opposition, temporal separation, synthesis. These are some of the well-researched ways in which paradoxes can be dealt with, both within an organizational and an individual context. The one that I'm really interested in is the concept of not trying to really deal with paradoxes, really transcending paradox. And Fritjof Capra talks about this in his 1975 book on Tao of Physics. He says, from an Eastern perspective, paradox is used as a lens for exploring the nature of existence. While individuals might experience tensions between oppositional elements, Eastern philosophies such as Buddhists, Hindus, and Taoists suggest that doing so actually obscures the underlying oneness or wholeness. And what Capra says here is that instead, these traditions stress the interdependence between the oppositional elements, suggesting that a paradox need not be resolved, but rather embraced and transcended. So the moment you get into transcendence and those kind of elements, you're directly entering the world of spirituality and the world of MSR. And we look at practices of connectedness and transcendence. And the one common theory, and again, if you go back and look at what Dr. Laszlo has done in his book on quantum leadership, all the oneness practice, all the practices, the common theme that seems to emerge out of all those practices is all those practices lead to a sense of connectedness, a sense of oneness. I have operationalized the concept of oneness through three mechanisms: experience of oneness being the most fundamental, which leads to a belief in oneness and also a oneness in relationship. So the causative factor here, if you may, is oneness, and the resultant factor, if you may, on the right-hand side is this paradox mindset, individual ambidextrity, and workplace well-being. So that's really the way the whole hypothesis builds up, is to say that on the left you have oneness, and as a person's oneness improves in terms of or develops through a development of consciousness, through whatever practice it may be, it's not wedded to any one particular practice. Do we see more of a paradox mindset? Do we see more individual ambidextrity? And do we see greater workplace well-being? I've added culture here because when you look at any strategy element like ambidextrity, which is really a strategy element from an organizational perspective, you cannot underplay the importance of culture. And using culture simply, country of origin being a sort of a proxy for culture is a way I've tried to operationalize the culture parameter. The research design is a mixed method, starts with quantitative, then gets into qualitative. So an explanatory sequential mixed method approach. Partnering with 5 IT services organizations, going from about 500-600 people all the way up to 5,000 people to recruit participants for the quantitative instrument survey. And based on the quantitative results, the selection of the qualitative participants will be done. The reason I'm focusing on the IT sector, and even in the IT sector, I'm focusing mainly on project management. Project management is a role within the IT environment where everything really, where the rubber meets the road. And those people need to be able to have a huge situational awareness. They need to be able to manage all kinds of unknowns, both from a technology perspective, people perspective, and keep delivering to what the customer's needs are. So it is the epitome of what paradoxical mindset would need to really survive in, and it's really where ambidextrous behavior of being both creative and process driven. Customers want things on time, on budget, but the way you get to that is an extremely creative, innovative process. So that's the kind of subject that I'm really trying to analyze. We'll be sourcing about 150 odd instrument completions from 7 to 10 organizations. I'm working with 5 as we now speak. And based on an analysis of these quantitative results, I believe we'll potentially have anywhere between 10 to 15 qualitative interviews, more to give a sort of a lived experience of what these people really feel, both in terms of their own practices of connectedness and how they bring that value to the workplace in terms of being able to manage the paradoxes and deliver on time, on budget, in spite of all the problems they face through a creative, innovative approach. I think the benefits from this research, and this actually builds off what Dr. Razzo spoke about in terms of prospective theorizing, is my belief is that the consciousness lens has to become a central organizing principle for management, for leadership, for organizations. If we have to really, the fact that we will survive will be based on this particular thing coming to be. And what this research will help do is bring that consciousness development to the core of organizational strategy. Because if project managers can be more ambidextrous, can have a better paradox mindset, then why consciousness development should not become an integral part of selection, of training, of leadership development? And if it can happen for project management, why not for all others within an organization? The Trojan horse here is that these high consciousness leaders then effectively become enablers for business as a force for good, right? So instead of trying to come at it from saying the business needs fixing, it's how do we use the consciousness lens to allow the business, to facilitate the business to actually achieve its core objectives. And while it's achieving its core objectives, the fact that the business transforms to become a business for a force of good becomes sort of a side effect or sort of a nice outcome to have on the side rather than the goal of it. And this is how I would really summarize everything in one sentence if I had to, is that those who are aligned with oneness as development of consciousness would give, can flourish better amid multiplicity and complexity. And multiplicity and complexity is something that we're going to live with. You have to flourish, we have to flourish in that environment. And oneness may be the answer to that, in the middle of all the chaos that we are going through as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikram. And Janelle, you are up next. So.
Thank you so much for this honor and this opportunity. I'm trying not to cry happy tears because it just means so much. So knowing limited time, my name is Janelle King. I am a Fetzer Scholar. I'm pursuing my PhD at Saybrook University in Humanistic Psychology. And I am thrilled to introduce you to my passion. But first, take a moment and breathe with me. Just take a moment to breathe in and just kind of hold it at the top for a second. And then just breathe it out. And imagine, if you will, that you're at an art gallery and there are tons of people there, crowded experience. And in the middle of this room is a platform. And on top of the platform is a kind of rickety looking ladder. And above the ladder is a panel in the ceiling with a magnifying glass. Would you climb it? This speaks to a level of agency that I'm really fascinated by. And I've introduced agency as one's level of self-awareness and feeling of control over their actions relative, in my particular studies case, to the nature of change, the change process itself, and one's influence and impact over aspects of the change process. Do we think we can act? Do we believe we can act? Now, being who I am, I'm also specializing in creativity studies. And so I look at my agency through a lens of creativity, which Glavinow and Beghetto introduce a new definition for, being a principled engagement with the unfamiliar and a willingness to approach the familiar in unfamiliar ways. And when I read this definition, it made me think, well, wait a minute, that kind of ties in with spirituality. And if I use Carol Baskin's definition, spirituality in a very broad sense, going to what Ornida said about the human aspect, it's that which helps bring about wholeness, meaning making, and inner peace. So I introduced these three pieces because the world, the business community, the research community tends to explore these in a siloized way. And there's an assumption that comes through that research that all three of these are separate and distinct. But that's not my lived experience as the director of creativity and innovation, as a visual facilitator, as a spiritual person, as a change agent in the world. I experience these things as being interconnected. And really, it's more like this. There is no real difference to me in the energy that comes from creativity and spirituality. And so that leaves me with a question about what's the nature of this creative spiritual change agency? If creativity and spirituality are connected as I experience them to be, what is the living experience of drawing upon one's change agency as informed by those creative spiritual energies and dynamics? I'm obsessed with this question because it's my lived experience every single day. However, I also know I am probably not the only person who has experiences with this. So my research question led me to a methodology choice of heuristic inquiry. And Joan Marquez, I hand over heart to you for your phenomenology presentation earlier today. So my study is going to leverage this qualitative research design following Moustakas heuristic inquiry methodology. And that's a unique approach to business-related research because heuristic inquiry seeks to deepen one's understanding and appreciation of a topic of inquiry through the living experiences of others, rather than provide a definitive answer to a research question. And if I go into the proposed design, I'm really viewing this as an adventure because as each person involved in my study needs to have that personal relationship with the topic of inquiry, they are going to be co-researchers right along with me, not subjects, not participants. That's part of Moustaka's methodology approach. So with that in mind, recruitment is going to be very targeted and leverage clear criteria for participation. And the folks who are proposed for this study are currently adults who are engaged in organizational transformation efforts and who experience a connection between their CS inner lives and their change agency. And the per-person sampling process that Joan talked about in the methodology presentation applies here as well, albeit using a snowball sample where folks will be recruited from 4 unique practitioner communities at this time. I'm considering recruiting from the Edgewalker International community, the MSR community, the Fetzer Institute community, and an iGold community of use of self practitioners, which is a change model that I am drawn to. So the recruitment would snowball via a series of introductory emails between researchers and candidates with high trust relationships, recommendations from those referring candidates and co-researchers. And because of the size of the combined member networks that I just mentioned, I have a potential participant pool of over 5,000 people. However, from that, I am hoping to target 25 candidates for recruitment and include between 12 and 15 as co-researchers for the study. In terms of instrumentation, it takes 3 forms: interviews with the individual co-researchers themselves, archival data, and myself as researcher. Because I have a living experience with the phenomenon, the co-researchers also have a living experience with the phenomenon. Heuristic inquiry assumes a social constructivist view and understands that we are so connected with what we study that there is no pretense of objectivity. Therefore, researcher as instrument is leveraged in this case. In terms of data collection, I will be relying upon co-researcher interviews and recordings and transcripts. I will have my field notes from the experiences and reflexive journals. I'll have creative expressions from myself and the co-researchers. And also, one of the highlights of this type of methodology, tacit knowing is a valid form of data collection for heuristic inquiry. Again, because you are so connected to what you are studying, the tacit knowing that data is validated. For data analysis, Clark-Moustakis outlines an 8-step protocol. It's highly rigorous to ensure comprehensive approaches to rigor, including member checking and all the things that Joan Marcus mentioned in her presentation. So keeping it moving, that's nice. Clearly, I'm interested in it. What's the relevance to MSR? Well, my research is going to explore an important gap in the literature that I've found in preliminary lit reviews so far by integrating management and spirituality with change agency via a business lens of creativity. I think you probably can relate that currently there's some research on spirituality and change management. I can vouch that there's research on creativity and change management, and there's definitely research on how agency impacts change management. However, these have not been combined to date in the research. And by focusing on the high-stakes organizational challenge of achieving successful change, leader and manager perspectives can expand beyond action-oriented change agentry to include being an oriented change agency, including the creative spiritual, for how to best achieve desired organizational goals. And inviting CS dynamics into hardcore business problem solving, such as how do we make this change in the organization, that may introduce a new paradigm for change management, organizational transformation, and business leadership that values creative spiritual contributions. One of the things I was asked to do in the application was link to some interesting theoretical concerns. Funny that I should ask that, because the fundamental organizational change theories that shape change management efforts to this day are those which drive the need for my proposed research. Kurt Lewin's force field theory of change and the three-step change model served as the foundation for most Western evolved change management theories. And these theories translated change approaches into detached processes and metrics that could be commoditized and manipulated for more desirable outcomes. If you have been a part of an organizational change effort that has not had an MSR touch to it, you probably can relate to this. Interestingly, the failure rates of such change efforts appear to be significant, with some researchers citing rates of up to 70%. And as Sandra Loddick said earlier today, no one wants to make the world worse. So since the 80s, there have been various change models emerging that sought to bring the personal back to the change process, such as the Bridges transition model, spiral dynamics integral, use of self model, levels of change model, etc. And while these models praise the cultivation of self-awareness and in inner life, specific attention to CS factors for cultivating self-awareness, those are largely absent. In fact, the only thing I could find so far is one 2018 industry study of use of self practitioners did address spirituality specifically by including spiritual practices as one of many ways practitioners cultivate self-awareness. However, the actual spiritual practices were never discussed. It was a bucket category, nor were the effects on practitioners discussed. I found that pretty interesting. So what's the potential impact then for this research to management and to leadership and change management? I truly believe that this research has the potential to break through the impersonal facade of the action-oriented study of organizational transformation and broaden the path for a being-oriented approach. The power of creative spiritual dynamics for organizational transformation conveyed via stories of co-researcher living experiences could raise awareness and increase leaders' willingness to cultivate CS dynamics within their leadership practices and teams. Executive coaching and leadership development training are also two promising opportunities in this regard. So for you, my MSR family, I have three asks. Help me make this research as powerful and as credible as it can possibly be for practitioners and for publication, so that we can use this as a means to crack that hard shell of resistance and get more of our research through. So please engage the brain, push my thinking, call me on my BS if you see me going down a path that doesn't seem quite right with my research. With the hand, connect me with resources, people you know, potential partners that you know, who could help and support with this. And lastly, because I truly believe that the head and the hand have to be mediated by the heart, please encourage, nurture, mentor me. Because I am 2 years out from finishing this dissertation and I can use all the support I can get. Together, we can climb that ladder. We can bridge this space between the mundane and something magical. And we can bring rich insights in service to our world. This is me, if you would like to get in touch. These are my references, if you would like to get a screenshot, and it's just the beginning. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Such an appropriately creative presentation and a heartfelt plea for support and partnership. So thank you so much. I am going to move over to Anita.
Anita Mendiretta is a scholar at IIT Delhi and assistant professor at Delhi University. My supervisors are Professor Shweta Singh and Professor Surinder Singh Yadav. And the topic of my dissertation is relationship between corporate social responsibility and firm performance. So basically, I have three research objectives. The first one is relates to consciousness levels of the organization. I want to look at the levels of collective consciousness and relate it to corporate social responsibility and responsibility. My second objective is to look at the ambiguities in CSIR research domain by keeping an update on CSIR ethical reality. And my third objective is looking at the bidirectional association between corporate social responsibility, and firm performance. So for my first objective, it's aimed at exploring levels of collective consciousness as an evolution from a lower level to a higher level of consciousness. And there's a substantial research for turning of consciousness in social science discipline and ethical management studies, linking it to organizational level. Literature is also has its way looking at the problems of consciousness, and the most intriguing I find looking at the easy and the hard problems of consciousness. Easy relates to doable kind of problems, which relates to neuroscience and cognitive science, and like in the area of neuropsychology and brain imaging. And it's easy because it's doable and it's famous also. But the hard problem lies in the subjective aspect of measuring it, and the problem of experience, subjective experience, different integrative experience, and understanding different conflict of interest. So literature has also proposed 3 levels of collective consciousness, like Pandey in 2008. They propose that material, social, and spiritual consciousness of organization and connected Wilbur ideology. And they said that material conscious organization has a predominant occupancy relation with the material existence. Similarly, socially conscious organization has predominant occupancy with the mental existence. And spiritually conscious organization has with spiritual existence. So we ask, what are the motivations, aims, frameworks, ethics, and standards underlying these consciousness levels? For my second objective, I'm more into looking at the literature because I've noticed that there is this similar attention given to CSIR and CSR research, and earlier both are considered as reverse of each other. Means presence of CSR means CSIR is not present there, so reverse of each other. But literature has now suggested that they are not reverse; they are actually they can coexist with each other, and CSR and CSIR both can exist in any organization. So further, there are many studies on CSR as compared to CSIR. So basically, I'm looking at the intellectual gap the literature has created in this area. So I want to look at the overview of CSIR literature and reference to publication trends in journals and authors, and looking at the prevalent and emerging themes in CSIR, and looking at exploring topics, development, academia progress, and directions for future research. So for this, I am aiming for a hybrid model, and past scholars have recognized the importance of hybrid research as leads to superior results. And let me mention here that CSR has various bibliometric analysis and topic modeling exercise as well, but CSIR has no bibliometric and topic modeling exercise. So I find this as a good combination of looking into this aspect. Regarding my third objective, I'm looking at the bidirectional association between CSR, CSIR, and firm performance. There are various mechanisms exist in literature. For instance, Slack resources, it says that prior firm value influence CSR. So it basically suggests that when the organizations, they have better financial positions, they'll be having Slack resources, and then we can use the funds in CSR engagements. The question made by literature is whether CSR is a voluntary exercise and usually depend on excess funds availability, or the past performance is imperative for investment in CSR engagements. Or can we say that less profit means low CSR and better profit means high CSR investment? So these are the various deliberations made by the literature, and these are the most prominent work in this area. For the good management mechanism, it suggests that when the firms they are improving on CSR, they may have good stakeholder relationship, and then their financial results may improve in future. So because they'll be in that way, they can generate more competitive advantage, retain good qualitative workforce, and the employees will be more satisfied, their morale will be high, and the customers will be satisfied and investing in purchases. So this is also one of the mechanisms in the literature, and these are the deliberations. For the when we look at the CSIR and firm value, there are not many studies in this area. So few studies are there. They have analyzed the impact of ESG controversies and firm values. There are various alternatives and permutation, combination in this mechanism. And so I'm looking at the possibility of this bidirectional association. So looking at the association between CSIR and CSR, we have again various moral framework in the literature, which suggests that when morality follows morality or the past morality are encouraged to perform similar kind of practice, or CSR means more CSR. The second probability could be past morality liberates a licensed performance of immoral conduct. And a third could be past immorality inspires cleansing to moral practices. So CSIR means more CSR in future. So there are various kind of tensions exist in these bidirectional links. So these are all working papers. So I have talked about the problems which I'm investigating in this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anita. Such beautiful work, as always, and thank you for being here. Lastly, we will hear from Ndiaga.
Good evening, dear member. My name is Ndiaga Sey. I'm 20 years old. I'm currently a student at Gaston Berger University of Saint-Louis in Senegal, in my first year of my thesis. In the context of my thesis, I'm interested in military and paramilitary service because a series of conflicting events related to religious expression have occurred in recent years, and religion remains a sensitive aspect to be studied in a country where religious belief has a strong impact on people's lives. So, renewed interest in the religious fact is emerging within organization. An abolition of the border between professional and private life, a fulgurating exchange of information, the demand of individuals for their personal recognition. So, the aim of this research is to answer the following problematic. How does the regulation of religious fact at work participate and consolidate the institutionalization of military and paramilitary service? How can explain the role played by the mechanism of regulation of religious fact in the quest for legitimacy? How does the religion incident occur in a professional context? What posture do officers use according to the type of incident, and how do they behave emotionally? Interest of this research: the lack of research on the religious fact of the work in Senegalese organization, the absence of studies on the management of religious expression in the military and paramilitary service, the strong impact of religion in the life of individuals, especially in the Senegalese context. So we will try to combine the theory of social regulation and the neo-institutional approach in order to understand the conception of the rule in the management of the religious fact at work and their purpose for organization. To our knowledge, two theories have rarely been used simultaneously in the same research. Despite their difference, they have many points of contact while being complementary rather than in opposition to each other. For the methodology, we will use a qualitative method in two forms. Firstly, we are using the methodology of critical incident, also call it the method of cultural shock, by Emmerich and Rothberg, which facilitates the study of significant event, and his study will be one of the first to use it in the field of management of religious fact at work. The method isn't used today to describe or modify a behavior in objective way, but to better understand and consider different psychosocial constructs to contain it in the subjective and intersubjective experience of the actor. In this perspective, We flow to work of Leclerc and al. 2010. The subject who submit a critical incident file in brief and individualized gridware. She or her first describes the context in which the incident occurred, that's to say, what constitutes the environment, the institutional rule, the work rule, and procedure. The subject then describes the interactive sequence to relate word and gesture constituting to actions. He just reports his own strategy and reaction as well as those observed in other actors with whom he was interacting at the time of the incident. These two methodologies will help us to understand to understand disagreement and conflict and the way in which sanctions confer legitimacy in organization. We are an embryonic stage because in the first year of our thesis, we are asked to read a lot. I'm open for criticism and contribution, but also possible collaboration to complete this work. Maybe I forget to say that we are using the theory of social regulation and never-institutional approach. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention, for your kind attention.
Thank you so much,
I
Ndiaga.
have some problem of the connection because of the rain.
Yeah, you did fine, and we heard you very well. Thank you so much. All right, well, we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to just generously open the floor to former judges, other community members, peers. Any questions, comments, kudos, suggestions? This is a reflective moment, a celebrated moment, and another opportunity for MSR mentorship.
May I make them? Yeah, so first of all, congratulations to all the finalists on wonderful presentations, and congratulations to Vikram also. And I think a very perceptive, self-reflective comment in the beginning, last year versus this year. So there's a process of improvement, and I think that's the theme of this whole MSR community. Through deeper self-reflection, we know we get better. So I wish everybody sort of keep at it. I have seen my own presentation submissions and rejected and then getting accepted to Academy of Management. So just good luck and just perseverance pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. I'm less moderating and more just holding the space. Vanessa, go ahead.
From the other side of the pendulum, so to say, as a fellow peer and kind of like, working our way to that paper or the published paper or the presentation that kind of is cohesive and, just kind of like the steps before you. It's very encouraging to see, and also because of the Fetzer, some of the Fetzer scholars circles or meetings that we have had, kind of like the development of what you are doing is giving me a safe space also as one of the people that comes after you. It's, you're carrying also the others that come after you by just, sharing your process and sharing the semi-final or close to final, or, kind of the product that you have, if I may say so.
It makes it real, doesn't it, Vanessa?
Yeah, it makes it real, and then also makes the pain real, which is good, because sometimes you're just kind of like, am I the only one? And it also makes the success then real, it makes the, okay, you can get over this. It's this, people have made this, and I see them, and I can't maybe touch them, but I kind of feel them, So it's very encouraging.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
The pain is absolutely real. I can tell you that for sure.
So I want to tell you a brief story about a moment I met Robert Ouimet, who is a chairman of a board of a large company in Canada. And he was coming to the Academy of Management when it was held in New Orleans, Louisiana. And Jerry Bieberman introduced me. He said, "You two need to meet each other." And Robert, as a CEO, built in spiritual practices. He had 14 spiritual practices that the company adopted, and that they tied directly to values that they wanted to live so that they could be a more effective company. And he did his own dissertation research on that process. And as we talked about MSR, he said, you know, what is it that might really help young scholars in their research? And I said, well, you know, it would really be wonderful, because he wanted to sponsor something. He was wealthy, and he wanted to sponsor something for MSR. And I said, well, how about, you know, we don't have a dissertation award. What if you sponsored something like that? And he said, I'd be willing to do that if it has both management, spirituality, and religion all included. And we hear a lot of that in today's presentations. And he said, oh, and then I said to him, wait, you know, when I think back to when I did my dissertation, there was no support at the dissertation proposal stage, and that I had no money to do any research. There were no grants, there were no awards ahead of time, only at the end. And I said, that doesn't make sense to me. Would you be willing to fund the dissertation proposal? Because I think that's when people need the support and the affirmation with their committees, especially if you're bringing in spirituality and religion, because those have not been typical management topics. And he thought that was brilliant, so he funded it. And so that's what started it. And I just want to bring his spirit in. He died about 10 years ago, after living a full and wonderful life. And just to honor that he could see the possibility of doing something unique that all of you are now benefiting from. And I hope you'll think about how your work might benefit others that follow you. I think, I forgot who was just talking about standing on the shoulders. Oh, Vanessa. That was so beautiful, Vanessa. And so you really think about the legacy you can leave when you do your work, as the way Robert Ouimet left a wonderful legacy that you're all benefiting from. So I just want to share that and congratulate you all. I feel so proud of the work you've done and really excited. It's like I want to learn from you. You're cutting edge. Can't wait to see the results. And we want you to come and present at MSR when you have those results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Any final comments from?
If I can just echo Judy's comment about when I did my PhD kind of comment, that time we didn't have much resource either. I mean, support either. And I think if nothing, nobody else supports, at least there's one Judy Neal here, was kind of the mother to all of us, if not, you know, in the academically and spiritually and, you know, and intellectually. So, but there's a lot more support in this community than we had those days. There were sort of, it was very lonely. I think it's still lonely. The PhD process is lonely. So I had learned one one study. When are you ready to get a PhD? Because you're always struggling. Well, this professor, you know, my advisor doesn't give me a PhD. So they said, when are you ready to get a bachelor's degree? When you think I know all about the world, I've read all the books and, you know, I know. So then you're only ready for bachelor's degree. A few years later, then you, or sometime later, you come back and say, oh, I really don't know everything, but this professor, he or she knows everything. So let me come study with them. And you come and study, and then you sort of begin to study, and then you say, okay, well, okay, but you get a master's degree. And then you say, but I don't know, I still don't know everything. Then you come back and come for study. And then you still think you don't know anything. But now you find that this professor, he also doesn't know anything. All equally naked in the rarefied space. Now you're ready to get a PhD. So you have to get to that level where you feel your advisor, your professor is kind of, you know, also dancing at the rarefied level where, you know, it's just barely knowing about things. So just to keep on getting deeper in a certain area and keep working at it. And That's when I said perseverance. I mean, it sometimes feel like, I don't know, and nobody seems to know. Well, how can I do something about it? There's no research on it. There's not there's nothing there. What do I do? What do I cite? But
I love that. I want to second and I also add on what Anil just beautifully articulated. I think I made this comment in front of this group a few years ago when we were in person about what it actually would take for you as a kind of new to this profession, just started doing your own research without even knowing your research will be ultimately recognized by the larger world. The sense of lonely as a ranger traveling and embark a journey and with uncertainty about what the future would unfold, it's already very spiritual. And I actually bow to you for the courage and you do the work. Some of the beautiful leader already demonstrated that is needed. Jody Fry, in case you missed his session, and he really shared his life journey, the spiritual journey, how that has been important for his professional endeavor on this kind of questions. Do you have that sense of patience and the courage to go through this journey, even if it's in a small, even isolated fashion? But you truly believe this is on your heart, on your guts? You choose to believe what you're doing right now is wholehearted participation. You're giving your life into something. You wonder if you're going to make a difference in the world. This is all very spiritual commitment we're talking about. And always remember, everything starts small. I'll give you a few examples so you know where you're situated in this larger kind of a system building. At the Fetzer Institute, I can be biased because I love the Fetzer Institute. So I'm going to give you a few examples. Hopefully you will learn something from there. So when 6 co-founder of the SEO movement, Roger Weisberg, we lost last year, in 1994, they came to Fetzer Institute, the Seasons Meeting House, a place for renewal. And the world did not recognize there was such a thing as social and emotional as a field was new. 6 of them, because they had the teaching experience, noted there's something special within the kids and not being articulated, never been studied yet. They somehow choose to believe the precursor or conditions needs to be there for student become active academic learner. The kids needs to feel 1, safe, sense of security. 2, they need to feel they are deeply being cared and loved. Well, then all of a sudden they recognize, hey, there's something really important. It's once again conditioning and socialization for any one of the kids. So they put their heads together, 6 of them had the meeting, series of meeting, and eventually they named themselves the Collaborative Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASL, to be the name, 28 years ago. I'm glad they did it. Because you look around in the world, in the US particularly, 92% of school districts across the board are utilizing various levels of content that is social and emotional learning. Another example, and what my favorite one, knowing the role of practice, contemplative practice, which is a very familiar term and practice to most of us on the call, they took a lot of community, small number to begin with, to introduce that into the US, into higher education, for example. So since 1997 to 2009, 12 years in time span, Fetzer support 10 fellows each year. In the end, we get 120 fellows. Look at where we are. Contemporary education and higher education in the United States is a vibrant movement. And people using the contemplative and mindfulness as a container to address, needs to be addressed social justice issues. They teach us not to come from a place of anger or hatred, but rather to tending practice self-care and love the people who believes utterly different, to say we're fundamentally one human family. Then when Judy and I, 5 years ago, we met 7 years ago, 5 years ago, we talked about what is one thing we can do to really to build this wonderful MSR community. We believe is to support younger generations who's starting to ask those big questions, who can use a little help, either it's a mentorship, either knowing that they are part of the lineage where they are in power, where they have the agency. So the idea was 10, it was 20 each year. This is the 4th year, guys. So we are roughly getting about 80, and we will finish this 5-year by next year, adding another 20. We're gonna get 100 Fetzer scholars. Don't worry about the Fetzer part. We're gonna get the younger generation 100. Gosh, never underestimate that 100 people, when they are actually committed to relationship and to be there for each other and open to get the support and love from the flame keepers and the seasoned scholars like Judy, like Anil, who's here, like a lot of people who care about you because they've been there in the past. Margaret Mead said, how about movement building? It takes a handful, which means a very small number, thoughtful citizens. Find a way to work together. That's how you start a movement and sustain it. My invitation representing the Fetzer Institute, that is, we're honored to be part of this journey. Look at where we are. So many of you stepped up to become leadership role. You imply the lens into your research. Janelle, that's just fascinating listening to you, for example. This is just the beginning of something that's extremely exciting. So on behalf of the Institute, I send profound congratulations to all of you. Would love to see you. I don't know, any of you go to Seattle this year? I will be there anyway. Let's meet together. Thank you. Paul, sorry, that went a little long, but I just can't help with it.
That's beautiful, Joan. Thank you so much. No apology necessary. I'm just present to a defining quality of MSR, that we embody the consciousness to honor and award the courage, as Joan says, and the work and the process before just the result. That's just really beautiful. So